Hi, I'm Richie theWizKid.
And I'm Mr. Most Days Off from the Best Darn Diddly Review Show, and we just wanted to take a quick minute and say to all of our listeners out there that we hope you have a very Merry Christmas and a happy holiday season.
Especially if you're spending your time down at the dog track trying to win last-second Christmas money, or if you're straight up having to steal a certain video game from a certain store because Sonic told you to take it.
Hey, buy us Bone Storm or go to hell.
And stay cromulent to each other.
Hey, I get to say that.
Don't!
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. This is a weekly podcast for anyone who loves The Simpsons, or ever has loved The Simpsons, hosted by two dudes that grew up on The Simpsons. My name is Miles, better known as Mr. Most Days Off, and today we are coming at you straight out of Springfield with our review of Boy-Scouts in the Hood. And as usual, I am bringing along my homie on the west side, your co-host with the most, Richie theWizKid. How you doing today, Rich?
That's Scouts with a Z, just to make sure that we can clarify that quickly. I'm doing great, man. This episode is fan-freaking-tastic, and I remember this episode fondly, but there's so many gags I forgot were a part of this one. It's just such a great episode. We definitely have an early contender for one of the best of the season, I will say, but I'm sure we will get plenty into that. Let me throw it back to you, the man, the myth, the don't do what Donnie don't does. That is Miles personified. It is Mr. Most Days Off.
You know, you nailed it with all the gags you're talking about, because I was just amazed. I love this episode. I had a lot of fond memories of just the A plot, essentially, but the B plot, or just the early setup, there are so many jokes that are quoted all of the time that I completely forgot were actually a part of this episode, and it was really, really fun to rewatch. Of course, the song we'll be getting to is an absolute blast, but there is just a lot to love in this episode. In fact, I'm almost as impressed by how many gags they were able to cram into this episode as I am how much they are able to afford with just $20 in the montage song sequence of this episode.
I think we both wrote that note down. I want to find that rub-on tattoo 24-hour place.
I've heard of places where you can get a rub 24 hours, but I didn't know it was a it's a rub-on tattoo.
A 24-hour rub? Sign me up.
Yeah, that just sounds painful after a while. There's going to be chafing involved. But let's go ahead and dive right into this episode, because we're going to have a lot to talk about and some singing to do. We haven't done that in a while, or at least not a Simpsons song. We, once again, in Season 5 tradition, had short credits with no chalk gag. The Simpsons do have a couch gag where they run in and they find that their eyeballs are already waiting for them on the couch. It's actually kind of a really cool but kind of creepy animation as the eyeless Simpsons run into the living room.
But they're fine. They're fine. Get it?
After all, Richie, not everything in cartoons has to be 100% realistic.
Yes, it does. Just like the internet.
I love that joke later, but again, we won't jump ahead. We open up the episode in the arcade, where we see Martin is playing the My Dinner with Andre game, which...
A classic.
If there was ever a movie that in no way, shape, or form should have a video game adaptation, My Dinner with Andre is probably it. I have not seen that movie, but I've known of it through reference and a little bit of reading, and I do believe it's basically two guys who are just either, I think they both have theater backgrounds or something like that. They have a conversation for like 2 hours. Not a lot of thrilling moments to turn into an exciting video game, but Martin seems to really love it.
Well, if you remember, one of our favorite TV shows besides The Simpsons of all time has an episode based on My Dinner with Andre.
I do in fact remember My Dinner with Abed.
Yes.
6 seasons in a movie!
6 seasons in a movie! But yeah, that's a great episode where they're setting up his birthday party back at the bar, but he's having a My Dinner with Jeff, basically.
Yep. Yeah, it's really fun. I do like to, just real quick, the choices on the arcade stick that Martin is playing include Tell Me More, Trenchant Insight, and Bon Mot, or Bon Mot, I'm not sure. It's French.
I'm sure it's like Bon Ma. It means fuck you.
I don't know what it means. It's French, I'm pretty sure, and I think it means like a witty remark, something of that nature.
Oh, bon moi.
Oui, oui. So, right next to the My Dinner with Andre, we have Bart and Milhouse, who are playing Panamanian Strongman, where a man who I believe is supposed to be a South African drug lord. I'm just using context clues, and I could have completely misinterpreted this, to be honest, but I believe he was supposed to be a South American drug lord who had climbed to the top of a building, much like King Kong might, and is actually being shot
or
by...
Rampage.
Rampage, dude, that preview looks dope. I know it's stupid, I know it looks dumb, but oh my god, I'm excited. I'm so excited, but yeah.
Especially when they add the third monster at the end of the teaser.
What more do we need? A 50-foot alligator, right? Something like that? But yeah, so for now, this drug lord is actually shot off the side of the skyscraper where he falls to the ground, and George Bush comes out in pixelated form and says to him, "Winners don't use drugs," which is a fantastic joke for anybody our age or anybody who has ever spent any time in an arcade in the late 80s and early 90s, because during the Reagan and Bush era, when the drug war was really being run rampant, it was actually mandatory that all arcade screens and U.S. arcades had a screen that popped up at the very beginning that had a message that had the like federal symbol on it, and it also said, "Winners don't use drugs." So that was something that we all saw every time we put a quarter into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or the Simpsons arcade machines.
Or Sunset Riders.
Or X-Men was good. There's a lot of great arcade games. We really got to get that going. I know we've had some people ask if we're ever going to do any of the Simpsons video games. We both have the Simpsons arcade game on PS3. Just got to figure out a way to get that up on YouTube. And I'm not super tech savvy with that, but I'm sure I have friends who are, so we'll have to work on that.
No es bueno.
I actually really like, as Bart's getting ready to play, gives himself a little pep talk. Be cool, Simpson. Be in the game, but not of the game.
Very strong words from a little man.
Unfortunately for Bart, as soon as he loses, he makes the mistake of saying out loud, "Aw man, I'm out of money." And this immediately starts a sequence where we see two men at a security panel watching monitors throughout the arcade. They zoom in on Bart and Milhouse, and they actually declare that they've got a code red. 2 Caucasian males out of money in Sector 4.
That's presumptuous because they don't know that Milhouse is out of money. It's almost like they're profiling the poor.
Immediately, alarms and lights start to flash. There's smoke coming out of everywhere. There's actually a door that opens. It's like a smoke-filled corridor. And out of it steps the squeaky-voiced teen who politely asks them to leave. It's really funny because it seems like it's going to be like almost like a Darth Vader type of figure. Somebody really ominous and scary. And then just this geeky little teen comes out.
Pimply-faced boy that's got his, 18th job of the series already.
He's already got another job later in this episode. And it's quite a commute, actually. So, for now, Bart and Milhouse, now kicked out of the arcade, wonder what they're going to do to kill time. And a homeless man comes up and declares, "You mustn't kill time, boys. You should cherish it. Seize the day. Can I have some change to get loaded?"
At least he's honest about it.
Yeah,
I'd be
totally.
more inclined to give money if they were telling me what they're going to do with it.
You know, people are always talking bad about how the homeless are just going to spend that money you give them on, drugs or alcohol. And I'm thinking, is there anybody in society that needs drugs and alcohol more than the homeless? So let them have their jollies. I mean, what does it matter to you if their $2 goes towards a sandwich or a 40?
If they can survive on a 40, then more props to them.
And there's a sandwich in every beer. We learned that in college.
Yes, that is very true.
We didn't learn much else, but we did learn that there is a sandwich in every beer. Oh, I also want to say the homeless guy looked really familiar to me. I believe he was used back in the episode where Herb Pal was actually homeless and living the transient lifestyle while he was in between the Homer car disaster and the talking baby miracle that saved his business.
So this bum basically saw that Herb came back to be a millionaire again and decided, I gotta head to Springfield, because they weren't actually in Springfield when they were around the bonfire.
No, he had to jump that train, you're right.
Yeah. It's a hell of a town.
It's a hell of a town. At the Simpsons' home, we actually see Homer is sitting on the couch with a pile of books, which is odd in itself. He says out loud that he's excited to finally have some quiet time and to read some of his old favorites. Instead of picking up the books, though, he picks up the honey roasted peanuts. Ingredients: salt, artificial honey roasting agent, pressed peanut sweepings.
Homer, I have to go out and pick up something for dinner.
Steak?
Money's too tight for steak.
Steak?
Sure, Homer. Steak.
And that just leaves Homer on the couch, and we get one of my favorite quotes from Homer of all time. Probably not the favorite, just because it's such a tight list, but it's a really, really good one.
The last peanut, overflowing with the oil and salt of its departed brothers. Uh-oh.
He actually takes the jar of peanuts, and it's mostly empty, so he's doing the thing where he's kind of shaking it into his mouth at this point. The last peanut actually falls from the container, hits the floor, and rolls under the couch, so Homer actually drops to the floor and starts reaching under, desperately trying to find that peanut he really desires.
Ow, pointy! Ew, slimy. Oh, moving! Aha! Aw, $20. I wanted a peanut.
$20 can buy many peanuts.
Explain how.
Money can be exchanged for goods and services.
Woohoo! Hey! Wow!
Unfortunately, though, in all of the excitement, which, first of all, we have to stop there and just laugh at how great it is. Again, we actually haven't gone to the Homer and his brain sequence in a few episodes now, I don't believe. And when we get this one, it is so great. And it's not the only one we're going to get either. So there's more greatness to come. But this whole concept where his brain has to explain in the most simplistic of terms how money works, and then he gets excited about finding a 20 spot, only to get too excited and end up losing it, where it catches wind and flies right out of the window.
Oh, poor Homer.
We get a sequence that very much in my mind resembles the feather sequence from Forrest Gump, where the feather is kind of flying over the city. Only in this case, it's a $20 bill, and it lands in the parking lot right in front of Bart and Milhouse.
So you're saying Forrest Gump ripped off The Simpsons?
I was actually going to say, I don't remember the year of Forrest Gump, but I'm pretty sure Simpsons did it if we're going to go that far. I think that's a bit of a stretch in this case, but I do really like that just the timing of this is really great and would be a total, actual miracle, as Milhouse is about to declare here shortly, if this happened to you as a 10-year-old boy. $20 was a huge amount of money. I don't think we could have stretched it as far as these two are about to, but even in more realistic terms, $20 was a huge amount of money to a 10-year-old in 1993.
Absolutely. And just for the record, Forrest Gump was 1994, so we're about at the same time.
Yeah, it's real close. So you never know. They could have seen this sequence.
Tom Hanks might have been hiding in the Simpsons writing room, laughing evilly. I've got an idea.
We follow the money until it lands right in front of the boys, and Milhouse actually notices it first.
Bart, look!
Wow, maybe a plane exploded.
Our prayers have been answered!
Just that he doesn't even consider a plane full of people exploding being worse than the fact that he just got $20 to split with his friend.
And they don't immediately turn around and go back in the arcade.
Right. They decide they've got bigger plans in store. They decide they are going to take their newfound wealth and head off to the Quickie Mart, where they actually have a special request. They tell Apu that they want a super squishy all syrup.
Made entirely of syrup.
I love all the reactions of the customers here because it pans around the store and you get people that are dropping milk and looking up from their magazines. And the absolute best part is Jailbird or Snake, depending on who you or what you want to call him, is in the middle of robbing Sanjay, but he even stops and gasps and interrupts his own robbery to see the boys who are ordering an all syrup super squishy.
An all syrup super squishy? Oh, sir, such a thing has never been done.
Bart puts the money on the table and says, just make it happen.
But then we get that great scene that's like a reference to Star Trek, obviously, where where the whole squishy machine is shaking. Apu's sweating and struggling, making comments like, "Oh, she won't hold. She's breaking up. Ding! All done. If you survive, please come again."
An absolutely fantastic sequence. I did not realize that was a Star Trek reference as much as it was just kind of like a parody of all action sequences, in the sense that the intensity of the scene was really, really high. The machine was physically shaking. Apu is sweating. They were using a lot of close-ups of his face, and it really was treated more like it was a bomb that might go off at any point more than it was a squishy machine.
Well, it just reminds me of Scotty in the original Star Trek, where he's saying, "I'm giving her all she got. She's breaking up."
Oh, that's a good point. Again, I wasn't a big Trek person, so that's why that reference was lost on me, but I think that makes sense.
When I was a kid, my dad taught me about that stuff. I didn't actually watch it, but I would later in life.
I do also want to point out, really funny, that when Apu actually goes to adjust the machine to make it all syrup, he has to adjust the dial from recommended dosage right past unhealthy dosage and all the way to experimental, which is at the far end of the dial.
I thought that paints a lot of different pictures in your mind, doesn't it?
Either way, the kids now have the Slurpee or Squishy of all squishies, and immediately they go outside to give it a try, but it's so thick. Bart takes a sip and is like, "Whoa, that's good squishy."
"What's it like, Bart? Bart? Bart?"
Yeah, it's like they go on like this insane sugar rush, and they treat this in a lot of ways like it's drugs or alcohol in some manner. The reactions they have are a little bit over the top, but immediately Bart is like, "Okay, we're young, we're rich, and we're full of sugar. What do we do?
Let's go crazy Broadway style."
And then we get one of the great song sequences in Simpsons history. Springfield, Springfield, it's a hell of a town. The schoolyard's up and the shopping mall's down. The stray dogs go to the animal pound. Springfield, Springfield.
Springfield, Springfield, New York, New York.
New York's that way, man.
Thanks, kid.
It's a hell of a town. So this is a great song, and it's also a great montage as we see what the kids are doing as they are painting the town green with their thick and delicious all syrup super squishies. They actually do a whole lot of stuff. This is what I was talking about, where I don't know how the hell they made $20 go this far, because first up, they go to an incredibly fancy skate shop. It looks kind of like they'd be shopping at like a Barney's type of atmosphere, where, you know, very hoity-toity, upscale.
And not the Gumball Barney's.
No. Milhouse is actually getting to demo one of the skateboards on a in-store half pipe in the background while Bart is talking with the salesman. To be fair,
they might not have actually bought anything.
I was to say, to be fair, they may not have actually spent any money there. I will give you that. However, they definitely spend some money at the VIP-only arcade they go to, which is set up very much like a casino would be, where the high rollers area is, of the high-stakes slot machines, I should say. It's just really funny when you see it with arcades and kids, but still having the butlers serving drinks. Or, I guess, waiters, but they're dressed like butlers.
And that alone, just to get in the VIP area, that's more than $20.
Oh yeah, that's gonna toss some money. And plus, even if it's off Broadway, a production of Cats? Come on, they were sitting front row.
Yeah, but they're so short, they probably just snuck in.
Yeah, true. I like the fact that they go to Cats, because I think it's just another little joke about this being a parody of the song New York, New York. And of course, Cats is well known for being in Broadway, or on Broadway in New York. Maybe I'm overanalyzing that, but I thought that was what they were going for with that.
I always took it as like a Frank Sinatra reference.
Same concept. Yeah, doing the New York, New York. Yeah, exactly. So they also have enough money to buy a whole lot of Toothless Joe's bubble gum, which they blow ginormous bubbles to the point where they end up covering their entire bodies with bubble gum. And I love this sequence because Homer actually walks by and gets a dip of his finger in the gum.
Free goo.
Ugh. Why he thinks that's a good idea, I don't know. But maybe he knew it was Bart's, which makes it ever so slightly less weird, but at the same time still entirely disgusting.
Maybe Homer always knows exactly where Bart's at. Maybe he's got him like planted a tracker before trackers were a thing. Because Homer always seems to pop up when Bart's like cutting class or not going to taekwondo lessons, Homer's always close by. So I wonder if there's like a little sneakiness involved.
Maybe he sent out Barney to be one of his spies, because in the very next sequence we see... I'll say this too. I really like how throughout the sequence the music starts to get slower and slower, and it starts to resemble in a lot of ways how they'll do alcohol and drug sequences in movies, where it starts out, everything's going great and everything's a really good time, but as things wind down or go on through the night, things get a little bit more chaotic and less fun, a little bit darker and grimmer. And that happens throughout this entire sequence. Towards the end here, the kids are walking out of that 24-hour rub-on tattoo shop we mentioned, and they meet up with Barney, who has another just incredible line. I don't know where your magic pixies came from, but I sure do like your magic pixie drink.
And he steals the cup, and he keeps drinking it, and they run off, which is weird, because when Bart wakes up the next morning, he's got the cup in his hand again.
Well, I'm sure there was a lot of blacked outness going on, as we're about to find out, because we're not sure what happened after this sequence, but we do know that when Bart wakes up the next morning, he is in pain. Ugh, my head.
The remorse of a sugar junkie.
Ugh, I don't remember anything.
Really? Not even this?
Ah! Oh no! I must have joined the junior campers!
The few, the proud, the geeky.
Boy, a man on a squishy bender sure can do some crazy things. We cut to Barney, who is on a ship out in the middle of some sort of body of water, and he's dressed like a sailor.
Oh no, not again.
Clearly not the only person who had a rough time on a squishy bender the night before.
Well, to be fair, he had to couple that with whatever alcohol he'd consumed before, during, and after as well, so...
I think it's safe to assume that Barney probably drinks most of his squishies the way that we used to in college, where we'd add quite a bit of alcohol to them after they were mixed.
Those were so good, though.
You could get really drunk really easily on those because they tasted so delicious. It'd just
and a
be
high
like,
blood sugar.
cherry squishy with rum in it was like thebomb.com for another dated reference.
We were being physical, so not you and me, but like we were doing.
I was going to say, wait, what? What are you trying to imply?
I was like, we had a higher tolerance when we were playing volleyball.
Oh, I don't think that playing volleyball affects your alcohol tolerance, but I think I know what you're going for.
But it stretched it out when we weren't drinking it all at once, at least. Sure.
The next day at the breakfast table, Bart is trying to, I guess, reconcile what happened the night before. I really like how they do this sequence, though, because for a moment it seems like he's genuinely going to take responsibility, but as you'll quickly see, that changes pretty fast. Okay, look, I made a terrible mistake. I wandered into a junior camper recruitment center, but what's done is done. I've made my bed, and now I've got to weasel out of it.
I know you think the junior campers are square and uncool, but they also do a lot of neat things, like sing-alongs and flag ceremonies.
Marge, don't discourage the boy. Weaseling out of things is important to learn. It's what separates us from the animals. Except the weasel.
In high school, I took a speech class, and it was all seniors, but I took it as a freshman to get it out of the way. And we had to do, like, famous quotes, and we actually had to draw it onto a poster board. And I actually drew Homer's head, and I did this quote on there, where I actually included "Sept the Weasel" at the end. And I just thought it was, everyone got a huge kick out of it. They let me bring my Simpsons VHS tapes in too, and when we'd finish early, even the teacher would sit down and watch the episodes with us.
That's awesome. Sept the Weasel. And it's, I mean, fairly accurate, I'd say.
Yeah.
Homer's a bit of a genius at times. The next day at school, Bart has a plan. He's going to get out of this one way or the other, and all he's going to do is he just takes the uniform to school in a brown paper bag, and as soon as school's over, he's just going to return it. Problem solved.
Sounds like an awesome plan to me. Hide and shame.
I really like this interaction with Milhouse and Bart here, and Principal Skinner, of course, but Milhouse says to Bart that he's really lucky, because Bart just joined the junior campers. Milhouse actually got a dirty word shaved into his head. And, of course, right at that moment is when Skinner walks up.
Oh, what is it with you kids and that word? I'm going to shave you bald, young man, until you learn that hair is not a right. It's a privilege.
I love Skinner so much. As Skinner walks off with Milhouse to shave his head, the bully sees the opportunity with no authority figure to pick on Bart. They steal his uniform and they start playing keep away. Only Bart doesn't really care. He doesn't want the uniform. He doesn't want to be part of the junior campers, so he just walks away and lets them have it. Except the bullies aren't having that. Jimbo actually comes up and bullies Bart into pretending that he cares about the uniform while they bully him.
It's a great moment. They do a typical trope that you see, but they turn it on its head, and I like that part. It makes you think a little more.
Yeah, very much so. When Bart does finally get to class, Mrs. Krabappel announces that they're going to have a surprise quiz. It's not what she was going to announce, but since Martin brought it up, she might as well. After the test is announced, though, another kid who I don't think either of us recognize from Bart's class raises his hand and reminds Mrs. Krabappel that the junior campers have a required meeting and he's going to have to miss the test.
I don't know if we'll ever see this child again, by the way, but that could be explained at the end of the episode.
That's true.
Cha-cha. It made me want to play Friday the 13th.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I kind of missed that game. I love this reaction, though, because Bart immediately sees the opportunity, and in the next sequence we see he's kind of like hopping up and down on one leg, trying to get his uniform on, and he's saying to Mrs. Krabappel, Mrs. K, I'd love to stay, but this uniform does carry certain responsibilities.
I just love Nelson's reaction to him. Ha ha, nerd.
Enjoy your test.
Huh? Oh.
Yeah, it's a great moment where Nelson essentially realizes he's, trying to pick on Bart, but Bart's the one that's getting his way, essentially.
And the junior campers have the best leader possible.
When Bart approaches the junior camper's room, he basically is kind of deciding, he's down in the dumps about it, but he's like, you know what, it's got to be better than the quiz, right? And he walks in to find Ned Flanders leading the troop. Well, it's Bart Simpson. You're just in time for Help Pay the Old Folks Day.
Help yourself, but stay above the equator.
That's Jasper, and it's enough to scare Bart away. He takes off running, but unfortunately he's not used to wearing a handkerchief, and it gets caught in the door that he slams, which basically throws his head at... This is actually kind of a violent scene in a lot of ways. His head gets slammed back against the door.
This
and
is
it
before
causes him to go
concussions were a
unconscious.
big deal, okay?
True, yeah, this is long before we knew about CTA. Long before we knew about CTE, you're totally right. But either way, Bart's out cold. And when he wakes up, it's to one of the campers being instructed by Ned on how to give Bart mouth to mouth. Bart screams and fights this kid off.
Should I keep doing it?
I feel like Ned may have missed some of the basics of what mouth to mouth is supposed to be for.
But it made for a funny moment.
Oh yeah, it's really good. Really good. And Bart's impression of the junior campers really doesn't get much better from here. It's pretty lame. It starts out with Ned teaching the kids how they can spread peanut butter on a pine cone to create a makeshift bird feeder, which is pretty dumb. Bart decides he's had enough, and he actually starts to head out of the room. But first he hears Ned tell everybody to pull out their pocket knives, which immediately captures Bart's attention. He actually goes up and grabs one of the kids' knives, and he's really impressed that it has a spork. But almost immediately, Ned stops him.
Sorry, Bart. That's a Neddy no-no. You can't handle a knife until you read this book and pass a safety test.
And Bart doesn't want anything to do with having to read a book and take another test, so he just blows it off and says, "Who needs a knife? Knives are boring," and he walks off.
By the way, can I mention that as Bart was walking into the room for the first time, there was a sign that says the junior campers have no affiliation with the Boy Scouts of America?
I missed that. That's great. That's really great. I really like the next sequence we get because it directly answers Bart's previous statement or question when he said, "Who needs a knife?" And we see a whole series of times where knives come in really, really handy. Starting out with Mo and Hans Moleman, who have gotten into some sort of scuffle where Mo has decided that he needs to draw a knife on Moleman.
That's not a knife. This is a knife.
And Moleman gets a very brief moment of glory where it looks like he actually has the upper hand on Mo when he pulls out a much larger knife than Mo has. Only it may have been a little bit too big because it actually ends up toppling Moleman over. The weight of the knife pulls him on inside and causes him to fall.
Poor Moleman.
Right after that, Martin walks up and offers to share his cookies with Bart if only Bart could help him cut the ribbon. Immediately, though, Jimbo comes up. He pops in and says, "Here's a knife," and cuts the ribbon, opening up Martin's cookies.
"Oh, goody! Now let's all share these delicious..."
"Share this!" And Kearney comes up and pushes Martin into the mud, and then they take the cookies and run, leaving Martin and Bart with none.
Oh.
Then we get, again, maybe my favorite sequence in this episode, but it's really hard to say because there's so many good ones. But all of these jokes are just so good. This one is fantastic. Dr. Hibbert is actually performing a surgery in the middle of the streets.
"Stand back. This man's appendix is about to burst. Luckily, I've got my trusty pocket knife."
I love this joke because...
this is a great scene, yeah.
Hibbert actually does use his pocket knife to remove this man's appendix, though when he said this man's appendix was about to burst, he was not kidding. In fact, it's very much like a grenade. He throws it off screen. We see this ginormous explosion. And the person whose appendix was removed actually gets up and thanks Dr. Hibbert.
"Don't thank me. Thank the knife."
I actually like this joke a lot, just in the sense that it's a good joke, but it also sets up a pattern. At least we're going to see at least one more major example of during the David Merkin years, where they like to put a lot of praise on inanimate objects, because it's not that long from now that a certain inanimate carbon rod is going to steal a prestigious reward from Homer in an upcoming episode. I just thought it was funny that they put all the glory on the knife.
The knife. The knife.
So all of this actually does change Bart's mind. He decides that, you know what, maybe knives are worth the effort after all. So he reads a fantastic book. It's a great joke here. The book he has to read in order to earn his knife is the 10 Do's and the 500 Don'ts of Knife Safety.
Don't do what Johnny Don't does. They could have made this clearer.
So this manual has a bunch of images of things that you shouldn't do with your knife, such as it looked like the guy was about to put toothpaste, or he did put toothpaste on his knife. It looked like he was going to try to brush his teeth with his knife. They
wouldn't put it in there unless somebody tried it once, right?
That's how signs get made. There was an image of him trying to shoot his knife with a slingshot, which, to be fair, that's basically a bow and arrow.
Yeah.
And lastly, don't kill a cat, Richie. That's a rule, is you shouldn't kill your pet if you wield a knife as a Boy Scout.
Wait, so they don't want you to kill all cats?
Aw, they won't let you have any fun.
I think that last one could be up for debate. Cats are evil creatures.
Well, Homer comes in, and we get some great stuff here as well. Well, if it isn't the leader of the Wiener Patrol, boning up on his nerd lessons.
Homer, you should be more supportive.
You're right, Marge. Good work, boy. Egghead likes his bookie book.
Homer!
I'm just tucking him in. I love that sequence, too.
Egghead likes his bookie book.
I like how Homer makes fun of him throughout the entire episode, actually. We're going to get more of that to come. For now, though, the knife training is going well enough because Bart has graduated to the level of Pussy Willow, which means he can now carry a rubber knife.
Woohoo!
At first, he's discouraged by this. It kind of pisses him off that he has to take baby steps, but he's quickly interested again in the lesson of the day, which Ned announces they're going to be learning how to trap animals, which should, of course, only be used in a life or death situation.
Or in a Homer Simpson being your father situation.
Because immediately that's what Bart does, is he learns how to make a snare, and the very next sequence we see is Bart has laid a trap with a piece of pie on the floor and a very obvious snare next to it, but Homer just cannot resist the temptation. Ooh, floor pie. Homer gets caught up and he's dangling inches above this piece of pie, and I love this. He's still trying to get to it. Yeah.
He's like pendulum swinging.
He's swinging right over it, and you can hear him like, oh, and then Santa's little helper comes by and eats the whole pie slice, and he's more disappointed. Oh.
Now, to be fair, how long is that pie sitting on the floor, Miles?
More than 5 seconds.
Right. And how come Santa's little helper waited until that moment to eat the pie?
Oh my goodness. You're ridiculous.
There's a little mind control going on there.
Well, I guess you could argue that makes the prank even crueler because he has to watch the pie get eaten in front of him, but that's still...
Or Bart was just holding him back until the right moment.
Fair enough.
I mean, why set up the prank if you're not watching it?
Well, he's too busy learning how to sew because he's been earning so many merit badges. We see him sewing... We see him putting them on his uniform, I guess. He's got some for things you might expect, like archery. But there's some weirder things. It gets into debt collecting, embalming, TV trivia, and my favorite, patch forgery.
All great ones, except for that archery one. That one's a dud.
Also in this time, Bart has become much more sophisticated at trap making, though he still likes the floor pie as his bait. This time, Homer pulls into the driveway like we see him do in almost every episode during the credits. Only this time in the open spot next to him, there is a piece of pie sitting on a carpet in the driveway. Homer goes for the pie and falls into a hole that Bart has somehow managed to dig through the concrete in the Simpsons' home's driveway. Homer's really mad at first.
Bart!
But after a few seconds, he calms down a little bit.
Apple. And I love that he actually gets to keep the pie this time.
That's true. Yeah, he actually did earn the bait, essentially.
Yeah, it's almost worth it in that case, right?
Good point.
And do you think Bart got the pie with like leftover from the $20 still?
I don't know how. That $20. my bet is he had to go and like put $20 on like the blackjack table and hit blackjack a few times is the only way that money was going to last. But that doesn't make sense because they don't open the casino for a few more episodes yet.
And Marge isn't going to make him a pie without asking him what it's for.
Especially once the casino is open, because then she's going to be too busy gambling. For now, the kids are at their home, on the floor watching Itchy and Scratchy, with Homer sitting on the couch behind them. And I say that because it's important. They're watching an episode where Itchy and Scratchy are camping in the wilderness. It's funny how the Itchy and Scratchy shows always seem to relate to what's going on with the Simpsons' lives, isn't it?
Yeah. There's always an important lesson in there somewhere.
In this case, Itchy and Scratchy are sitting around the campfire when a storm breaks out, so they clearly need shelter, and Itchy takes some by driving spikes or stakes into Scratchy's feet and pitching him as a tent. He uses a stick to kind of raise up his middle section, and he takes shelter under the tent version of Scratchy.
So you're saying Itchy pitched Scratchy's tent?
Exactly. And this is where it seems that, as usual, despite his efforts not to, Bart is actually learning quite a bit from the junior campers. Because Bart actually corrects the show, saying that they use the wrong type of knots on Scratchy's tongue. This is another contender for absolute greatest joke in the episode, despite how simple this one is, because it's really, really funny. Lisa says to Bart,
"Oh, Bart, cartoons don't have to be 100% realistic."
And just then we see another Homer walk in front of the window while the original Homer that was sitting on the couch is still there. So I guess you could argue this is some of those clones we talked about, like we mentioned on the Throwdown Thursday podcast with Patsy the Angry Nerd. Or I think this is just a really good joke.
That means the current Homer is about to pass on to the afterlife. So this Homer arrived on a little early for his shift.
One of them will have to be buried in the backyard so they can go back to watching interdimensional cable.
What I liked about this joke is, like, I think I saw this episode in early middle school or late elementary school, but I was just clever enough to get the reference because it's one of those things where most people did not pay attention to the background at all. It's really obvious with this day and age and everything that what's going on, and being an adult, you can see it all. But as a kid, I felt so smart because I got what they were trying to say in this moment.
SMRT?
It just made me happy. SMRT. I mean, SMART.
Yeah, it's a joke that's pretty obvious. I think it works on a lot of levels. I can see how you can miss it if you were kind of casually watching or, maybe distracted by your cell phone while you're watching or something like that. But it's a really well-placed, just simple joke is another great thing about it too, is sometimes it's nice with all the clever writing that they do have in The Simpsons. Sometimes a just simple joke like this works the best.
Exactly. Wiener likes his bookie book. I mean, Egghead, sorry.
The next day at Junior Campers, we really start to see how influenced Bart is by these scouts, because when Ned asks him if he's ready, he replies, "You know Italy, know it, Nedley." Ned announces that the following weekend is going to be the father and son rafting trip, which I actually thought that was really funny just because there's no way they would announce this just 1 week in advance. Like, that would be something that was on the calendar for a really long time. But it does cause Bart to go into a panic. And to be fair, he's only been a scout for a little while, so maybe they had announced it in the past, and this was just the first time Bart was hearing of it. Either way, he immediately is bummed out because he really doesn't want to have to take Homer on this trip.
Well, we can point out that Ned Flanders is not actually a very good scout leader, I would say.
Why is that?
Well, if he's only announcing something one week in advance, I mean, that's not very scout-wordly. And the mouth-to-mouth practicing he was teaching, that wasn't very well performed either. And we're going to learn by the end of the episode, you don't win friends with religion when you're in a life-threatening situation.
Well, as Bart points out later, at least Ned is trying. We have to give him credit for that. For now, though, Bart is just really freaking out about what might happen if Homer does actually come along. He has a daydream or nightmare sequence, if you want to think of it that way, where Homer is on the raft with some other kids and other fathers, and he's rowing along, but I love how Homer's just acting like a complete imbecile as he captains this raft.
Duh, I'm the captain. My son is Bart. Splash, splash.
What an oaf. How embarrassing. And Bart envisions that these other parents are going to be very, very, I don't know, hoity-toity to some extent. Uptight for certain.
Hoidly-toidly.
I also like right here that we find out that Warren's dad, the kid that we met earlier, is actually in prison, but a special celebrity dad is being assigned, even though Warren really just wanted his brother to come along with him.
And it sounds like his brother really wanted to be there.
Right, yeah.
It sucks.
And that kind of goes to your theory of Ned not being great, because he's like, nope, sorry, Ernest Borgnine is already confirmed.
Why?
Somebody that kids would have almost no appreciation for, though we should talk about Ernest Borgnine real quick. Ernest Borgnine is actually an Academy Award-winning actor, and I always say this, if you Google him, he has a face that you will almost definitely recognize. It's very, very distinguishable. He's got a slight gap in his cheeks. He's got very kind of chubby cheeks where he's got just a very, very warm smile. And he's actually got a very long list of acting credits. As I mentioned, he did, in fact, win an Academy Award. He's also got a very eclectic amount of work because he's done a lot of movies. And up until his death, he actually did a voice on the show SpongeBob SquarePants. And that was all the way until 2012 when he passed away.
Always having fun. Hope I get to go out like that.
Yeah.
Not on SpongeBob SquarePants, though.
No, I'm not a big fan of that one. But yeah, just doing what he seemed to do what he loved. And he just seems like a genuinely really happy person. Now, he does admit that he was not really a fan of The Simpsons. Not that he didn't like it. He just wasn't, it really wasn't on his radar. It wasn't his scene. However, his children and his grandchildren specifically were huge fans. And when they reached out to him, he knew that he had to say yes because he knew how much his family loved the show. So I thought that was actually kind of cool. He just did it for the love of his family, and they said that he was an absolute great sport did everything at one point they have him singing, like, he's an Academy Award actor, and they have him singing Bingo as his name-o around a campfire. So, again, he was a really good sport and went along with everything, and it was a pleasure to work with from what everybody had to say about him. Just really funny that he was completely outside his element, really not knowing what was going on in the Simpsons world. I do think on that note, this will be a real good time to go ahead and take a quick break, hear from our sponsors, and of course from our Pottern family.
Hey, this is the Toph, host of the Gravity Beard Podcast, a variety show with interviews and discussions on a wide range of topics. Our guests have included a viral YouTube star, a former child actor. We've even had a guy on who may have solved the D.B. Cooper case. It's a delicious box of audio chocolate. You never know what you'll get. Find it on Podbean, iTunes, and other places you listen to podcasts. It's the Gravity Beard Podcast. It's what your ears will want to be listening to.
Hey guys, it's Richie theWizKid here from the Best Darn Diddly Review Show, and I'm here to talk to you about PopThreads.com, your number one source for finding awesome nerdy t-shirts. Are you sick from not knowing what to wear when you go out with all your friends on the weekends? Well, don't have a cow, man. Go to PopThreads.com, and if you use the code Simpsons at checkout, you can save 15% on all your t-shirt needs.
So Bart gets back from his scout meeting, and Homer is still making fun of him.
How was jerk practice, boy? Did they teach you how to sing to trees and build crappy furniture out of useless wooden logs? Huh?
And then the chair he's sitting on absolutely just collapses under his weight, which is hilarious.
Don't! Stupid poetic justice.
Actually, we were just planning the father-son river rafting trip.
You don't have a son.
Just Homer's so dense. But this is a truly great sequence, another fantastic sequence in this episode. A little bit different than the others. It's funny, but in a different way. But what's great about it is, bottom line, Bart doesn't want Homer to go. Homer doesn't want to go. Bart's trying to think of a way to come out, basically to psych out Homer, essentially. And he decides that since he knows that Homer doesn't want to go, then all he has to do is ask Homer to go. And then when Homer declines, it'll be Homer's fault and not his.
Smart idea.
It really is. And
it's a gamble, though.
The only issue is, meanwhile, Homer is having a very similar conversation with himself, only once again, in Homer style, we actually get to hear the conversation between Homer and his brain. Homer says to himself, I don't want to go, so if he asks me to go, I'll just say yes.
Wait, are you sure that's how this sort of thing works?
Shut up, brain, or I'll stab you with a Q-tip.
Dad, I really want you to come on this trip with me.
Bart, I'd be delighted to go on your trip with you. Go! So, long story short, neither of them got what they wanted. They'll both be going on this rafting trip together. And we actually see it's already time for the day of the trip, and they are on the riverside looking to buy a raft, which I thought was kind of strange that you would buy your raft on the river the day that you're planning on going. But fortunately, the sea captain's there, and of course he's trustworthy, right? He's got the finest.
Absolutely.
He's got the finest rafting vessel available in all of the 7 seas.
He totally doesn't remember that Homer out-ate his entire food.
Yeah, don't they have a business agreement still? Like, shouldn't this be like a sponsored rafting trip at this point? Of course, as soon as they put the boat in the water, it pops and sinks, and I think the sea captain says something like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, and kind of gets depressed for a moment. But it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal. All of a sudden, they don't really need their own raft, because after all, it is going to be 2 dads per raft anyway. And Homer just has one thought.
Please not Flanders, please not Flanders, please not Flanders.
But of course, Ned walks up and says, well, Homer, I guess we're boat buddies. You want me to zinc your sniffer? So down the river they go. And at first it looks like a lot of fun. Ned makes a terrible dad joke, though. He says, I guess that's why they call them rapids and not slopids. But surprisingly, Bart actually laughs at this, which does make Homer a little bit angry.
You're not my son.
Which To be fair, that's a little extreme to disown somebody because he laughed at a bad joke, but it is his mortal enemy.
It's Flanders.
Yeah, it's his mortal enemy. Absolutely. Ned cannot find the map as they get going, but as it pans out, we see that Homer has actually folded it into a hat and he's wearing it. Unfortunately, that's when the wind picks up and actually takes the hat off his head and blows it away. But Homer totally no-sells it, acts like he has no idea what's going on. He actually blames Ned. Then when he pulls out the Krusty Burger map, he actually tells Ned at least one of us is responsible.
Hey, there's a New Mexico.
I wanted to point out here that during that dream sequence earlier, this is actually dreams coming to fruition because Bart was afraid that Homer would be wearing the map as a hat because he totally was in Bart's nightmare earlier. It's funny that he got that right.
Father well.
He knows his father very well.
And it's not the last time we'll hear the New Mexico quote either.
There's a New Mexico.
Didn't know there was a New Mexico.
So without a map, we should mention that Homer and Ned's raft was, since Ned's the scout leader, they actually had the lead of all of the rafters. So no map, they're approaching a fork in the road, and Ned is crying out for help from Homer. We need to know which way to go, Homer. Tell us what the map says. But Homer is now just distracted thinking about Krusty Burger, because that's who sponsored the map. It was like one of those roadside maps you'd see when you were younger of like all the locations of Krusty Burger in town.
It's like the placemat you get at a restaurant at Denny's.
Yeah, that's accurate. So Ned has to guess because they're running out of time, and unfortunately he guesses wrong. I really love when the rest of the campers pass by. It's Ernest Borgnine who yells out, "Where are the sissy and the bald guy going?"
Well, and Flanders uses religion to figure out which way to go.
Yeah, he starts saying books of the Bible and like counting. I guess it's like eeny, meeny, miny, mo with religious figures or books of the Bible. It's a very Flanders thing to do.
So he makes another mistake as a Cub Scout leader.
You could say that, though. Again, he did bring the map. It was Homer who decided to turn it into a hat.
But this man borrows all of your stuff. You know so much about this man. He's your next door neighbor. Wouldn't you think twice about like leaving the map unattended? I'd be like, hey, Todd or Rod, whatever kid it is, don't let Homer touch any of your stuff.
There is a bunch of fan theories that this very, very thing is talked about to death about the movie The Blair Witch Project. And there's actually a theory that the two guys in that movie were actually trying to kill them. I think her name's Heather, kill the main female protagonist, because there's a big controversy with the map disappearing and who has it. It's actually a really interesting film theory on that on Matt Pat's channel if you want to check that out. It's really interesting, but same concept with this with Ned and Homer. Only this one we very clearly know that it wasn't Homer trying to get them killed. He just really likes silly things like paper hats. He's just Homer. Yeah, he's just Homer.
He's got a bald head, too. That gets hot.
And he's got to protect himself from the sun. We find out that's going to be a major factor in this episode. For now, though, the boat quickly finds itself floating out to sea, and Ned's yelling, "Homer, you've got to paddle harder. We have to fight the current."
Wrong again, Flanders. In a situation like this, you just relax and let the current take you back to fine land.
And as Homer sits back and relaxes, we see that the land is just fading off into the distance, and they find themselves lost at sea.
Doe.
The episode clearly cuts to commercial here. We fade to black, and when we get back, we see that everything is going much better than when we left. Homer is now on an island, singing "Sugar, Sugar," and dancing with some living candy, I guess, that can dance.
Sugar, do 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 do.
Honey, honey, do 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 do. You are my candy girl. And the candy starts to melt as the song starts to slow. We see Homer's waking up on the boat. He was listening to a Walkman, but the batteries clearly died, so he gets angry and throws it out into the ocean.
Lousy piece of junk.
Hey, I got that for my birthday. It was either Rod or Todd. I'm still not sure which kid is in that damn boat. I guess we should have mentioned it's Ned is with one of his sons. We're not sure who. But Homer's just upset now because he has to face stupid reality again.
Flanders, my socks feel dirty. Give me some water to wash them.
Again? Homer, we have to ration the water carefully. It's our only hope.
Oh, pardon me, mister. Let's ration everything. But what did you think we were floating on? Don't you know the poem? Water, water everywhere, so let's all have a drink.
So Homer starts to take a big drink of salt water, and all of the other 3 guys on the boat have to stop him. No!
Oh, what does it matter? We're doomed.
But just then, Flanders notices a seagull flying overhead, and he says, "That's a great sign! We're saved! Seagulls always stay close to shore. They only go out to sea if they're going to die." Splash! The seagull takes a nosedive right into the ocean.
Woohoo! See that, boy? Your old man was right, not Flanders. We are doomed. In your face, Flanders.
Another great moment of Homer it's more important to Homer to be right than to be alive in this instance.
Honestly, that might be my favorite part of the episode, because it's one that I remember probably more than any other one besides the Squishy song, because that was on the Songs in the Key of Springfield CD
sure.
when I was a child. But the whole seagull thing, and I thought I looked it up when I was a kid and found that is a correct thing, so I was always telling people about that scene.
Great scene. Bart actually gets mad at Homer at this point, and he yells out at Homer, "You know what? At least Ned is trying." But Homer decides, since they're all just being a bunch of ration babies, he's just going to put himself in charge of the rations. You see, the secret is to take tiny bites like so. Yum, yum, yum. But the bites become more and more rapid, and eventually it just gets to the point where Homer starts devouring the entire lot of all of their rations.
Can I just point out, before we get to it here in a little bit, I know we're a couple cuts away, but the regular rafting trip is one of the worst planned rafting trips I've ever seen in my entire life.
Especially if you had a fork that would take you out dangerously into open waters, you would know, without the map, they'd be like, okay, at the first fork, don't go left. And they would probably have all sorts of signs saying, this way to, the fucking ocean.
But I'm also saying the regular trip that everyone else goes on, it's terribly planned.
Well, yeah, they end up in Deliverance Country and then at Camp Crystal Lake at some point. They made some very poor choices along the way.
And I assume that the leader would be the one that plans the trip out, right?
I see where you're going with this, Richie. I see where you're going with this.
I don't have to connect all the dots for you people. I know this.
Homer is now depressed that he didn't end up on one of the smart boats, and he says that they're probably having a great time, but we get a small cut to them, and as I just mentioned a moment ago, they're actually going through some very spooky area of the river. You get a kind of ode to the dueling banjos, and you can see silhouettes along the river's edge, and it's very clearly homage to the movie Deliverance, and it definitely seems like at least some of those rafters are going to be squealing like a pig here shortly.
You sure do have a purty mouth.
Meanwhile, this is our first time seeing what's going on with the other Simpsons. Marge is actually getting worried at this point. We're not quite certain how long they've been missing, but it's less than a week because Chief Wiggum tells her that they really can't start searching until the boys have been missing for at least a week. He also mentions that they are really busy right now, so he has to let her go, but when he hangs up the phone, he just goes back to playing a game of checkers with a dog.
Hey, that takes all, if not more than all, of Wiggum's mental capacity?
King me. So back on the raft, we actually see a plane flying overhead, so immediately everyone gets excited. They think they're saved. Flanders goes for the flare gun so that he can get the plane's attention, but Homer almost immediately grabs it from him.
This ain't one of your church picnic flare gun firings, Flanders. This is the real thing!
He shoots the flare up in the sky where it nails the airplane, causing it to explode.
Don't!
But Homer's like, it's alright, it's okay. We're still gonna be alright, we're still gonna get saved. They're gonna come searching for the pilot, and then they'll find us. But just then, another plane swoops by and catches the parachuting pilot in midair, and they fly away.
Don't!
Right after that, we actually see 3 dolphins swim up to the raft, and once again, Flanders is very excited by this. He announces that dolphins always help humans that are lost at sea. We hear the dolphins chatter, and they actually put up subtitles where you can see that the dolphins are actually just saying, "You're all going to die," and then they swim away. And this is actually where Ned starts to lose it a little bit. He starts yelling out, "Come back, come back! Oh, we're done for. We're done for. We're done diddly done for. We're done diddly doodly done diddly doodly done diddly doodly done diddly doodly."
Slap! Flanders, snap out of it. Slap, slap, slap.
Thank you, Homer. I don't know what got...
Slap, slap, slap.
Dad, I think he's okay.
Slap, 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 slap. It's better slap to be slap, save, slap, then slap. Sorry. Slap, slap, slap. Sorry.
Diddly.
Slap.
Homer just assaults Ned Flanders in this sequence. That's what that is. He beats the crap out of him.
For the record, I think we did that very well.
I thought that was pretty good. I was impressed with us. That was one take, folks.
Yep.
Nailed it.
Right here, at the best of the darndest and the diddliest.
Yeah, we do say diddly a lot, so there's some practice.
Diddly.
Finally, we see the police are getting the search boat ready. They're going to go and try to find Homer, Bart, Flanders, and one of the Flanders children. Chief Wiggum says, "You see anything yet?"
Nothing, Captain. Someone took all the beer and cold cuts.
And we pan out and we see that the cops are still in the dock, and Wiggum declares, "That's it. I'm not casting off until we go to the store."
I mean, he doesn't want to run out of food. That's a safe bet right there, I would say.
Well, I think it's the beer he's most concerned about, to be fair.
Yeah, definitely.
And the men lost at sea are also starting to get worried about food. In fact, they are down to their very last bite, a single cheese doodle. And they decide they're going to use it as bait. Homer has a reel, some fishing line, and he can hook this doodle onto the line and hopefully catch them a fish. I love Flanders here. Godspeed, little doodle.
But he's so, defeated. Godspeed, little doodle.
Homer does actually get a fish to bite, amazingly, but much like he did in the monorail episode and probably a bunch of other times, he forgot to tie off the other end of the line. So the fish, the cheese doodle, and all of their fishing line are off to sea, but Homer says he'll be back. He doesn't come back.
He'll be back.
He definitely does not come back. So things are actually getting pretty grim on this boat at this point. Homer decides, even though he was going to save it for the end of the trip, perhaps the end of the trip is getting closer than they want it to be, so he's going to give Bart a present. He got Bart a real Swiss Army knife, and Bart absolutely loves it. He's really excited. It's really funny when Homer tells him that he actually swiped it off that Borgnine guy, and we see a cut over to Ernest Borgnine, who's defending the kids from a bear that has surprised them in the woods. And he's like, "Don't worry about it. I can fight him off with my trusty... And we cut away not knowing the fate of what happens with this bear attack with no knife to defend yourself with. Though, to be fair, that would have to be one hell of a badass to fight off a bear with a Swiss Army knife.
It comes with a spork. Hello.
Well, the magnifying glass turns out to be more powerful, as we're about to discover.
I want to bring up that I think that this is a much more meaningful gesture than what it appears to be. And it looks very meaningful. Even as a child, I remember, I thought this was a touching moment when Homer's giving the pocket knife to Bart, because it shows that he really cares. But I honestly think the fact that he took it from Borgnine is even more important, because that means Homer did not do this until they got to the boating sites with the sea captain and everything. And it was at that moment, Homer did not want to be there at all, but even feeling that way when he was there, still thought enough, even though he did a terrible thing by stealing the knife, but he thought that he needed to make an impression on Bart and show Bart that he cared. So, when I thought about it, I was like, man, it's shitty because he stole the knife, but it's almost super better and sweeter and a much more well-deserved present because of what at the time that he took it, I guess is what I'm trying to say, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think there's a lot of times where we see these interesting moments between Bart and Homer that are in a lot of ways very sweet, very touching. Shows that Bart and Homer really do have a strong bond between the two of them at times. It's just in a very Simpsonian and very unique to them. Even in the Simpsons universe, their bond is very unique because a lot of times they bond in the gray area. They're not morally bad, they're not morally good, but they are often very selfish individuals.
Chaotic
neutral. Yeah, definitely a chaotic neutral vibe for certain.
I mean, Patty Cakes. That's his real name.
The way that they commonly find ways to have these heartfelt moments, even though it's in a very abstract way, is a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
And we actually see on the boat, Homer is passing the knife to Bart, and he's warning Bart that he needs to be careful when handling it. And as he warns him, he actually drops it. But even worse, he doesn't just drop it. He drops it with every single item, every single utensil, all of the various gadgets that come on a Swiss Army knife exposed and open, so that there are essentially a ton of pointy, jagged metal surfaces coming in contact with their rubber raft. And this is another beautiful sequence because every time the knife bounces, you just hear this collective and it's bounce, and eventually it does come to a rest, and fortunately it didn't pop, almost by miracle. Maybe Ned being there did make a difference. And we should have mentioned they're actually in a very foggy area right now. It's very thick fog. You can barely see, but just for a moment, the sun peeks through the fog just enough to go through the also open magnifying glass, which is part of the Swiss Army knife, which of course now burns a hole into the raft. And at this point, everybody has more or less accepted they are about to die. Homer even announces that he can smell the stench of death upon them. Burgers.
It does smell like burgers.
At first, it seems like Homer might just be losing it, but Bart actually smells them too, and they look on the map that they have, that Krusty Burger site map, to find...
They know where they are.
Well, all they know is that Krusty opened a location on an offshore oil rig, so maybe that's what they're smelling. Unfortunately, though, because of the thick fog, they still can't find their way. But Homer tells them, quiet down, his nose can get them there. Steer that way, and he starts sniffing them to safety.
And I love the way this episode wraps up. There's been a lot of quick wrap-ups lately, but I love how Homer screws up along every step of the way. But literally the only person that could have gotten them out of the situation is Homer, and he gets his redeeming moments with a couple gags.
With his nose.
Dude, it
his love of
like,
food saves their heart. Yeah, or his love of food saves the day, totally.
This episode totally warms my heart at a couple different moments because it's a complete story. I like it so much.
Very much. This is a rock solid episode, and we're just about done with it. We see that Krusty is at this Krusty Burger location where there are employees, including that squeaky voiced teen we talked about earlier. So this guy is hustling, man. He's got to be making some dough. Unfortunately, there are absolutely no customers, which is going to make it difficult for Krusty to pay him.
I'm taking a bath on this.
We tried to tell you these are unmanned oil rigs.
Close the damn thing down. No one's ever gonna come.
And just then Homer runs in. Give me 700 Krusty Burgers!
You want fries with that?
And we get another one of these kind of sweet moments between Bart and Homer with a Simpsons twist, because Bart actually breaks down and starts telling his father how happy he is that he came with them and how proud of him he is. He's actually proud to have Homer as a father.
Go away. Eating.
Homer is now one-track minded, doesn't even care about anything but those 700 burgers, which, by the way, that was just for him. He wasn't sharing that with the other 4 people or the other 3 people on the boat.
But Bart was eating one.
I guess 699 were him then.
Yeah, in the last shot, Bart was actually eating one.
I missed that. All is well that ends well, I guess. The 4 on the raft have found safety, and it seems that the other campers that we last saw were being attacked by a bear managed to find safety too. They settle down for the night in an abandoned summer camp. They all start singing around the campfire, and we end the episode with a great Friday the 13th reference. It's a POV shot from the woods alongside the campfire circle. And it's not the exact same as they use in the Friday the 13th, but it's very reminiscent of the kill, 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 ma, 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 kill, 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 ma, ma, ma. the creepy Jason noise that you hear in the woods. It's perfect. And they actually do one last great bit where the camera actually starts to lunge, or the perspective we're from in the woods starts to lunge towards Ernest Borgnine and the terrified children who are looking into the camera.
And that's why we never see Warren again.
What a reset right there, right? That is I mean, you already mentioned it. We talked about some crazy fast resets. This one is just insane though. They kill off essentially a bunch of characters that we'll never see again and don't have names for other than Warren. Poor Warren's brother. He should have had one last great trip. I guess he was spared though. But that does bring us to the end of Boy-Scoutz N the Hood. Richie, was there anything else that you or that book wanted to point out before we get out of here?
My book, The Simpsons, A Complete Guide to Our Favorite Family, points out that in the opening scene with the arcade, that all the kids are in line for the Terminator game at the arcade. And then it lists all the badges that you already listed earlier. And it wanted to point out that Fat Tony actually appeared on a wanted poster in Chief Wiggum's office. But I wanted to second that I also saw the babysitter strangler on one of them as well.
That was in my notes as well. I was going to point out the babysitter bandit is in the wanted list along with Fat Tony. Totally.
With darker hair, I saw in the picture too. So she's changed hair color since the first episode.
Well, you got to keep the appearance off to stay away from the cops.
But other than that, again, I just want to say how much fun this episode was. This has been one of my favorite episodes we've reviewed up to this point because there's just so much greatness in it. There's so many great gags. The story itself was great. It's Homer and Bart, so that's something you know you're going to like. But it just, even going back and rewatching it and taking notes, I've seen this episode so many times already, and it was just even better than I remembered it. And I just got such a kick out of doing this one.
Absolutely. I had mentioned a couple of weeks ago when we did, I believe it was Marge on the Lamb, one of the episodes, that I was disappointed by the lack of the behind-the-scenes information that I usually enjoy providing on this podcast. Interestingly enough, this episode also lacked that commentary. It had Dan Castellaneta and Yeardley Smith on it again, and they largely just talked and were really funny, and it was great to hear their insight. But they didn't really share anything that would be more than them just talking about their experience, which was positive. At the same time, though, as many times as I watched this episode over and over again, doing notes and watching with the commentary, this one just stayed funny every single time. And you said it at the beginning of the podcast, even with the absolutely stacked amount of episodes that we've already had in this season and knowing some of the incredible episodes we have to come, this is absolutely going to be an early contender for definitely top 5, if not best episode of the season.
I completely agree with that statement for sure.
So that's a pretty strong note to leave on. I think we're going to go ahead and get on out of here. Richie, where can they find you online?
You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at theWiz_kid23. Also, while you're on Twitter, go ahead and give our show a follow as well. That's at Best Darn Diddly. That's DIDDLY.
And of course, that does work on Instagram as well. As for me, I'm at Mr. Most Days Off. That works pretty much everywhere. Please do me a favor and follow me on YouTube, where I am starting up a companion piece for this show called Behind the Diddly, just a quick little video segment every Friday, giving you a peek into what is currently happening on Best Darn Diddly, since we do record this podcast several weeks in advance.
Just to put it in context, today is the day that the official Infinity War trailer came out.
Oh my god, that looks so good.
I know, that puts in context how far in advance we are.
That could be a whole nother podcast just talking about that trailer. I'm sure there's probably podcasts out there that have done that, so we won't be one of them. We will again say, though, thank you so much for listening to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. We appreciate you tuning in each and every week. theWizKid and I will be back again next week with our review of The Last Temptation of Homer.
So make sure you all come back so we can zinc your sniffers.
Until next time, be cromulent to each other.
Hi, I'm Ocho.
And I'm Ortiz.
And together we make up East York's #1 wrestling podcast, the Ocho and Ortiz Wrestling Podcast.
That's right. And we mostly talk about the independents here in Toronto, the WWE, and on occasion, the UFC.
So if you like wrestling, or if you're an occasional mixed martial art fan, be sure to give us a listen. We're available on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Podbean at ochoandortiz.podbean.com, and you can find us on YouTube, where we post live videos from events that we attend. You can also visit our WordPress website, ochoandortiz.wordpress.com. The Ocho and Ortiz Wrestling Podcast, East York's #1 wrestling podcast.